Chapter 30. The King and the Kiss. The next morning the sun rose so bright that Irene said the rain had washed his face and let the light out clean. The torrents were still roaring down the mountainside, but they were much smaller, and so it was not dangerous to travel by daylight. After an early breakfast, Peter went to his work, and Curdie and his mother set out to take the princess home. They had difficulty in getting her dry across the streams, and Curdie had again and again to carry her, but at last they got safe on the broadest part of the road, and walked gently down towards the king's house. And what should they see as they turned the last corner, but the last of the king's troops riding through the gate. "Oh, Curdie!" cried Irene, clapping her hands together joyfully. "My King Papa has come!" The moment Curdie heard that, he caught her up in his arms and set off, running at full speed, crying, "Come on, mother! The king may break his heart before he knows that she is safe." Irene clung around his neck, and he ran with her like a deer. When they entered the gate into the court, there sat the king on his horse, with all the people about him, weeping and hanging their heads. The king was not weeping, but his face was as white as a dead man's, and he looked as if all of the life had gone out of him. The men-at-arms he had brought with him sat with horror-stricken faces, with eyes flashing with rage, waiting only for the word for the king to do something. They didn't know what. Nobody knew what. The day before, the men-at-arms belonging to the house, as soon as they were satisfied that the princess had been carried away, had rushed after the goblins into the hole, but found that they'd already so skilfully blocked the narrowest parts, not many feet below the cellar, that without the miners and their tools, they could do nothing. Not one of them knew where the mouth of the mine lay, and some of them had set off to find it, but they had been overtaken by the storm and not yet returned. Poor Sir Walter was especially filled with shame, and almost hoped the king would order off with his head, for to think of that sweet little face down amongst the goblins, it was unendurable. When Curdie ran in at the gates with the princess in his arms, they were all so absorbed in their own misery and awed by the king's presence and grief that not one of them observed his arrival. He went straight up to the king, where he sat upon his horse. "Papa! Papa!" cried the princess, stretching out her arms to him. "I'm here!" The king started. Colour rushed into his face. He gave an inarticulate cry. Curdie held up the princess, and the king bent down and took her in his arms. He clasped her to his bosom, big tears dropping down his cheeks and into his beard. And then a shout arose from all the bystanders, and the startled horses pranced and capered, and the armour rang and clanged, and the rocks of the mountains echoed back all the noise. The princess greeted all of them as she nestled by her father's bosom, and the king did not set her down until she had told the entire story. But she had more to tell about Curdie than about herself, and what she did tell about herself none understood except the king and Curdie, who stood by the king's knee, stroking the neck of the great white horse. And still, when she told what Curdie had done, Sir Walter and the others added to what she told, even Lootie joining in, singing the praise of his courage and energy. Curdie held his peace, looking quietly up at the king's face, and his mother stood on the outskirts of the crowd, listening with delight, for her son's deeds were pleasant to her ears, until the princess caught sight of her. "And there's his mother, Papa. See, there. Oh, she's such a nice mother, and has been so kind to me." They all parted asunder as the king made a sign for her to come forward. She obeyed and gave him her hand, but she could not speak. "And now, King Papa," the princess went on, "I must tell you another thing. On the night long ago, Curdie drove the goblins away and brought me and Lootie home safe from the mountain, and I promised him a kiss when we got home, but Lootie wouldn't let me give it to him. I don't want you to scold Lootie, but I want you to tell her that princesses must do as they promise." "Indeed, they must, my child, except that it be wrong," said the king. "There, give Curdie a kiss." As he spoke, he held her towards him. The princess reached down and threw her arms around Curdie's neck and kissed him on the mouth, saying, "There, Curdie, There's the kiss I promised you. And then they all went into the house, and the cook rushed to the kitchen, and the servants to their work. Lootie dressed Irene in her shiniest clothes. The king put off his armour and put on purple and gold. And a messenger was sent for Peter and all the miners, and they all came down to a great and grand feast, which continued long after the princess had gone to bed.